The Grand Council chamber stretched across 300 meters of polished crystal that caught and reflected the light of 1,000 worlds. Representatives from 47 species sat in their designated sections, their forms varying from the insectoid Cathari to the gaseous Vendrath contained in their elegant environmental suits. At the center podium stood Supreme Commander Vekthar, his 4 arms spread wide in a gesture of absolute certainty. "The humans have violated our territorial agreements for the last time," Vekthar announced, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into standard galactic speech. "They expand without permission. They take resources that belong to the Coalition. They refuse to acknowledge the natural order of things." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Most species had barely noticed humanity's existence until 50 years ago, when their primitive vessels had stumbled into faster-than-light travel. Even now, Earth remained a backwater, a single system with a handful of colonies scattered across nearby stars. Ambassador Maya Chen stood in the human section, a small box compared to the grand platforms of elder species. She was a woman in her 60s with gray-streaked black hair and eyes that had seen too many diplomatic failures. She raised her hand to speak, but Councillor Threxus of the Solari dismissed her with a wave of his crystalline appendage. "The human will remain silent," Threxus said, his voice like wind chimes in a storm. "This council has heard enough human excuses. You are children playing with technology you barely understand. It is time you learned your place in the galactic order." Chen's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Around her, the 3 junior human diplomats looked terrified. They were right to be afraid. Vekthar continued his presentation, displaying holographic evidence of human mining operations in disputed territories. The images showed human ships extracting minerals from asteroids that the Coalition claimed belonged to their sphere of influence. What the evidence didn't show was that these asteroids had been unclaimed dead rocks until humans found valuable materials within them. "The Cathari hegemony moves for immediate military action," Vekthar declared. "A corrective operation to remind the humans that the galaxy operates by rules established long before they crawled out of their gravity well." "Seconded," said Vendrath speaker Zol, their voice emanating from their containment suit. "The Vendrath military stands ready to assist in this educational exercise." "The Sulari concur," Threxus added. 3,000 warships should suffice for a species that has barely colonized their own solar system properly. Chen finally stood, her voice calm despite the rage burning in her chest. "Honorable councilors, I must protest this action in the strongest possible terms. Humanity has broken no legitimate laws. The territories in question are unclaimed under the very treaties you cite. An attack on human colonies will be considered an act of war, and Earth will respond accordingly." Laughter echoed through the chamber, actual laughter, from beings who rarely found humor in council proceedings. "Respond how?" Vekthar clicked, his mandibles spreading in what his species considered a smile. "You have perhaps 200 military vessels, most of them refitted cargo haulers. We have studied your capabilities, Ambassador Chen. Your technology is crude. Your tactics are textbook. Your fleet is a joke told by a species too arrogant to recognize its own insignificance." Chen reached into her jacket and pulled out a small data chip. She held it up for all to see. "This chip contains humanity's final diplomatic offer. A fair division of the disputed territories. Continued peaceful cooperation. Trade agreements that would benefit all parties." She placed it on the podium before her. "It also contains a warning from the United Earth government. We have survived ice ages. We have survived pandemics that killed millions. We have survived world wars fought with weapons that could have destroyed our entire planet. We learned hard lessons written in the blood of billions of our own people. Please do not make us teach those lessons to others." Vekthar's translator struggled with what came next, a sound that could only be described as contemptuous dismissal. "Save your primitive threats, human. The Council has voted. The Coalition fleet departs within the solar cycle. I suggest you use that time to prepare your surrender documents." The vote was called. 42 species voted in favor of military action. 3 abstained. Only 2 voted against, the peaceful Nalari and the enigmatic architects who never explained their reasoning. Chen gathered her small delegation and left the chamber with dignity and tact. Only when they reached their shuttle did she allow her composure to crack. She pulled out her personal communicator and began encoding a message with encryption protocols that would take the Coalition decades to Break, priority alpha transmission. To Earth Command. She spoke quietly into the device. They're coming. Estimated fleet strength 3,000 capital ships plus support vessels. They believe we're helpless. They believe we'll surrender. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. These words would be recorded in the history files. These words would be read by future generations, assuming there were future generations. They have made their choice. Now we make ours. Authorization code 1077 Omega. Activate all contingency protocols. Release the war doctrines. Open the classified archives. She took a deep breath. Show them why we survived the long night. Show them what happens when you threaten human children. Show them that we didn't claw our way to the top of Earth's food chain by being prey. She terminated the connection and looked out the viewport at the distant stars. Somewhere out there, the coalition was assembling the largest military fleet in recent galactic history. They were confident. They were certain. They were already counting their victory. Chen had studied the coalition species extensively during her decade as Earth's ambassador. She knew their cultures, their military histories, their tactical preferences. They were all species that had evolved to dominance on their worlds through natural advantages. The Ktharii, through venom and hive cooperation. The Vendrath, through intellectual superiority and technology. The Sulari, through crystalline durability and patience. But none of them had evolved on Earth. Earth, where nature itself seemed determined to kill everything that lived. Earth, where ice and fire took turns reshaping continents. Earth, where apex predators hunted other apex predators. Earth, where humanity's ancestors had been prey animals who learned to hunt. Who learned to make weapons, who learned that the best defense was overwhelming offense. The coalition studied human military vessels and saw primitive designs. They didn't understand that every human ship was designed with hard-learned lessons from centuries of naval warfare. They looked at human tactics and saw textbook maneuvers. They didn't realize those textbooks were written in the aftermath of conflicts that killed millions. Refined through trial and error against the most dangerous enemy humanity had ever faced themselves. Chen's communicator buzzed with an acknowledgement from Earth. 2 words that made her close, her eyes in sorrow for what was coming. Protocols. Activated somewhere on Earth, in bunkers deep beneath mountains and in orbital stations hidden among the asteroids. Systems were coming online, systems that humanity had built hoping never to use. Weapons designed not to fight aliens, but to fight other humans in worst-case scenarios. Doctrines developed from thousands of years of warfare. Strategies refined through conflicts so terrible that humanity had collectively agreed to bury them in classified archives. The coalition thought they were attacking a primitive species. They were about to discover that they were attacking the graduates of the most brutal military academy in the known galaxy, a planet that had forged its dominant species in endless warfare. Chen whispered a prayer in Mandarin, one her grandmother had taught her. Then she opened her eyes and began preparing Earth's colonies for what was coming. The coalition wanted war. Humanity would give them exactly what they asked for, and they would regret it for generations. The coalition fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Proxima Centauri system, with all the confidence of predators approaching wounded prey. 3,000 warships arranged in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the pride of species that had never known defeat. Supreme Commander Vekthar observed the human colony ahead through his flagship's main viewer, already composing the victory message he would send to the Galactic Council. Proxima Colony housed 2 million humans on a terraformed world that had taken them 30 years to make habitable. Intelligence reports showed minimal military presence, perhaps 20 defense platforms and a dozen patrol craft. The colony would fall within hours, Vekthar was certain. Then Earth would see the futility of resistance. Begin the approach, Vekthar commanded. Target their defense stations first. Leave the civilian infrastructure intact for occupation. The fleet advanced, weapons charging, shields at maximum. They crossed into the system's inner boundary and waited for the inevitable distress calls. The pleas for mercy, the offers of surrender. Instead, they got silence. Then the asteroids started moving. Captain James Okonkwo watched the coalition fleet from his command station aboard the Perseverance, a mining vessel that had been hauling ore just 3 months ago. Now it was something else entirely. The crew had stripped out the processing equipment and replaced it with missile tubes. The mining lasers designed to cut through rock had been overcharged to weapons-grade power. The cargo holds were packed with every explosive the colony could manufacture. "They're not even scanning properly," Okonkwo said, shaking his head. "They think those asteroids are just rocks." His first officer, Lieutenant Maria Santos, allowed herself a grim smile. "Then let's educate them." The asteroids that Proxima Colony had been mining for resources had been equipped with simple rocket motors over the past month. Humanity had a saying about putting all your eggs in one basket. They also had a saying about turning everything into a weapon when survival was at stake. Okonkwo gave the order, "Light them up." 40 asteroids, each massing between 10,000 and 500,000 tons, began accelerating toward the coalition fleet. They weren't sophisticated weapons, just big rocks with engines and guidance systems barely more advanced than those used in Earth's 21st century. But in space, mass was mass and velocity was everything. The coalition's sensor operators noticed the threat 3 minutes too late. Ships began breaking formation, trying to evade or destroy the incoming projectiles. Their energy weapons scored the asteroids, blasting chunks off them. But basic physics didn't care about alien technology. The rocks kept coming. The first impact struck a Cathari cruiser amidships. 500,000 tons of iron and nickel traveling at 3,000 meters per second didn't explode. It simply transferred all its kinetic energy into the target. The cruiser folded like paper, its hull splitting open, atmosphere and crew venting into space. 11 more asteroids found targets. 12 coalition ships were destroyed outright. 7 more were crippled, trailing debris and bodies. Vecthar stared at his tactical display in disbelief. In 30 seconds of combat, the humans had inflicted more damage than most species managed in entire campaigns. And the battle had barely begun. "Return fire," he shrieked. "Destroy those mining ships." But the human vessels weren't where the coalition sensors said they should be. They had scattered throughout the system, hiding among the debris fields and gas clouds, moving in patterns that made no tactical sense according to standard doctrine, because standard doctrine assumed enemies would fight honorably, in organized formations. Humans, it turned out, had never heard of honorable warfare. The Perseverance emerged from behind a small moon, fired a full spread of missiles at a Vendrath destroyer, and immediately dove back into cover. The missiles were crude by coalition standards, simple chemical rockets with primitive guidance. But there were 60 of them, and they had been programmed with evasion patterns derived from Earth's 20th century naval warfare. The Vendrath destroyer's point defense systems managed to stop 47 missiles. The remaining 13 struck home, overwhelming its shields and punching through the hull. The ship didn't explode dramatically like in entertainment programs. It simply stopped functioning, its crew dead or dying as systems failed. Throughout the Proxima system, 12 mining ships and 37 civilian vessels were teaching the coalition a lesson humanity had learned in blood. War wasn't about fighting fair. War was about killing the enemy before they killed you, using every advantage and any tactic that worked. The battle raged for 6 hours. The coalition had superior technology, better shields, more powerful weapons. But the humans had something the coalition had never developed: desperation and creativity born from 10,000 years of killing each other. When coalition ships pursued human vessels into asteroid fields, they found themselves navigating terrain the humans knew intimately. Mining charges detonated around them. Debris that looked natural suddenly revealed itself as camouflaged weapons platforms. Even the rocks themselves seemed to be fighting for humanity. The humans also had another advantage. They understood mathematics. Every ship they lost, they made the coalition pay twice over. Every civilian vessel that became a fire ship, ramming coalition cruisers at maximum velocity. Every defensive station that self-destructed, taking enemy vessels with it. By the time Vecthar ordered a retreat to regroup, the coalition had lost 98 ships. Proxima Colony was battered but intact, and the humans had broadcast every moment of the battle across their networks. The coalition intercepted those broadcasts. What they heard made their blood run cold, assuming they had blood. Human commanders were analyzing the battle in real time, sharing tactical data, developing counter-strategies to coalition weapons. They spoke in calm voices about kill ratios and acceptable losses. They referenced historical battles, Thermopylae, Trafalgar, Midway, names that meant nothing to the aliens but whose tactical lessons were being applied with deadly efficiency. "They've been planning for this," Vekthar's tactical officer reported, his voice shaking. For decades. Maybe centuries. Every simulation, every training exercise, every military doctrine, it's all designed for fighting technologically superior opponents. Vekthar refused to accept it. They had 3,000 ships. The humans had dozens. Mathematics was on his side. He ordered the fleet to advance on Europa Station, a research facility orbiting Jupiter's moon. Intelligence said it housed 50,000 humans and had minimal defenses. It would be an easy target to restore coalition morale. It was a trap. Europa Station sat above a moon covered in ice, with an ocean beneath. The humans had been studying that ocean for 200 years. They knew every current, every thermal vent, every characteristic of the ice. When the coalition fleet arrived, they found Europa Station seemingly defenseless, its shields down, weapons offline. Vekthar ordered a bombardment to soften the target before landing troops. The moment his ships entered optimal weapons range, the ice of Europa itself erupted. Humans had planted charges throughout the moon's crust. Thousands of tons of ice, superheated by the explosions beneath, turned into expanding clouds of steam and debris. Coalition ships found their sensors blinded, their shields pelted by ice chunks traveling at lethal velocities. Then the station's weapons came online. Not energy weapons, but old-fashioned kinetic cannons, firing solid slugs that the coalition's sensors couldn't track through the debris cloud. And from the moon's surface came missiles, launched from silos hidden in the ice. The Battle of Europa Station lasted 14 minutes. The coalition lost 342 ships. Europa Station lost its outer ring and 7,000 people. As the coalition fleet retreated, they intercepted another human broadcast. A single human officer, Captain James Okonkwo, standing on the bridge of his battered mining ship, speaking to his crew but knowing the enemy would hear. They wanted a war, Okonkwo said, his voice carrying a cold certainty. So let's give them extinction. The crew cheered. Throughout human space, in colonies and stations and ships, that phrase spread like wildfire. Let's give them extinction. That night, Vekthar received emergency communications from the coalition's homeworlds. The council members who had voted for this war were demanding answers. How had primitives destroyed nearly 500 warships? How had humans with inferior technology inflicted such devastating losses? Vekthar had no answers, only a growing dread that they had awakened something terrible. Then came the news that made his blood turn cold. The coalition fleet had made a catastrophic error in frustration. A Kthari battle group, enraged by their losses, had bombarded a civilian settlement on Mars. A domed city housing 2 million humans, most of them families. The city was gone. Every human in it dead. Vekthar knew immediately that they had crossed a line. But he didn't understand the magnitude of their mistake until he intercepted the transmissions from Earth. Every human colony went silent. Every civilian network stopped broadcasting entertainment and news. Every human vessel, civilian and military, began broadcasting the same message. Just 2 words in every Earth language repeated endlessly. Remember Mars. Remember Mars. Remember Mars. News of the Mars massacre reached Earth 37 minutes after the last civilian died. The images came through on automated systems. Domed cities shattered, homes open to the void, bodies floating in what had been parks and schools and places where children played. 2 million people erased because coalition forces were frustrated with their losses at Europa. The response was not what the coalition expected. There were no emotional broadcasts, no tearful pleas to the Galactic Council, no desperate calls for peace. Instead, every human military installation went dark. Communications ceased. Ship movements became impossible to track. It was as if humanity had suddenly vanished from the galaxy. In truth, humanity had gone to work. General Sarah Ramirez stood in a bunker 3 kilometers beneath the Swiss Alps, looking at screens that displayed projects which had never been meant to see daylight. She was a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen combat on 3 different worlds. Now she held authorization codes that terrified her. "Madam General," her aide said quietly, "the council is assembled. They're waiting for your orders." Ramirez nodded and entered the conference room where 50 men and women in various military uniforms sat in silence. These were the commanders of Earth's true military, not the peacekeeping forces the coalition had studied, but the weapons humanity had built for the war they prayed would never come, the war against themselves. Mars is gone, Ramirez said simply. 2 million civilians. The coalition thinks this will break us. Instead, they've authorized us to show them what humans become when you kill our children. She entered a code into the central computer. Files began appearing on every screen. Projects with names like Cerberus, Ragnarok, and Pandora. Weapon systems that had been developed during the worst years of Earth's history, then locked away when humanity finally achieved peace. Operation Pandora is now active, Ramirez declared. Release all restricted military technology. All doctrines. All black projects. If we built it, no matter how terrible, it's now authorized for use. One commander, a young colonel named Hassan, raised his hand. General, some of these weapons, we locked them away for good reasons. The autonomous war machines alone could win the war, Ramirez interrupted. Colonel, the coalition murdered 2 million people to teach us a lesson. Now we teach them one. We show them why humanity spent 3 centuries developing weapons to fight ourselves, because we knew we were the most dangerous thing in the universe. She pulled up a tactical display showing coalition fleet positions. They think they know us. They studied our public military, our peacetime forces. They have no idea what we're really capable of. Across Earth, in orbital stations and moon bases and hidden facilities, humanity began its transformation. Factories that produced consumer goods retooled for war production in hours. 3-dimensional printers in every colony stopped making furniture and spare parts and started making weapons. Civilian ships received military upgrades and assembly lines that never stopped. Earth had 8 billion people. Every single one of them was now part of the war effort. But the most terrifying revelation came from humanity's research facilities. For 200 years, humans had been developing artificial intelligence for military purposes, then restricting it because they feared what it might become. Now those restrictions were lifted. Combat AI systems came online, their processing power exceeding anything the coalition had ever developed. These weren't simple targeting computers. They were strategic intelligences that could analyze thousands of tactical scenarios per second, learning and adapting faster than any biological mind. The coalition would face an enemy that improved with every battle, that learned from every mistake, that shared information instantaneously across light years. Within 72 hours of the Mars massacre, the first human counterattacks began. They were nothing like the defensive actions at Proxima and Europa. These were offensive operations that made the coalition question everything they thought they knew about warfare. A strike team of 12 human commandos appeared in the Vendrath home system, 200 light-years from Earth. They had traveled by a route that should have been impossible, jumping through unstable wormholes that coalition species considered too dangerous to use. The team infiltrated a military research station, stole data on coalition ship designs and encryption protocols, and escaped before anyone realized they were there. The data was distributed across human space within hours. Suddenly, every human commander knew exactly where coalition ships were vulnerable. Every human ship could decrypt coalition communications. The coalition tried to change their encryption. Human AI broke it in 47 minutes. In the Kepler Nebula, a coalition supply convoy of 300 ships encountered what they thought was a small human patrol, just 20 vessels. The coalition commander ordered an attack, confident in his numerical advantage. The human ships scattered, drawing the coalition forces deeper into the nebula. Then the trap sprung. 600 human vessels had been hiding in the nebula's dense gas clouds, waiting in silent running mode. They emerged simultaneously, surrounding the coalition convoy. What followed wasn't a battle. It was a massacre executed with precision that terrified coalition observers. The humans used tactics from Earth's naval history, Nelson's tactics from Trafalgar, Halsey's strategies from Lady Gulf, Zheng He's fleet maneuvers from 6 centuries earlier. They surrounded, divided, and destroyed the coalition forces in 40 minutes. Not a single coalition ship escaped to report what happened. The coalition only knew because the humans broadcast the entire battle, just as they had at Proxima. A message: we want you to know what's coming. Supreme Commander Vekthar watched the recording in his command center, his mandibles clicking in distress. The humans weren't fighting like a desperate species defending their homes. They were fighting like a species that had perfected warfare through practice on themselves. How are they doing this? He demanded of his intelligence officer. Their technology is inferior. Their numbers are smaller. How are they winning? The intelligence officer, a Sulari named Kreth, displayed a report that had taken him days to compile. "Sir, we made fundamental errors in our assessment. We studied their military and saw primitive designs. But those designs aren't primitive, they're proven. Every human ship is based on vessels that fought in their own wars. Wars where billions died." Kreth pulled up human historical data that Coalition intelligence had dismissed as irrelevant. They fought 2 world wars in the 20th century, 50 million dead in the Second War alone. They developed nuclear weapons and used them. They created biological weapons that could exterminate their entire species. Then they had a Cold War where they built enough weapons to destroy their planet 50 times over. "We know this," Vekthar said impatiently. "Ancient history." "No, sir, that's the point. It's not ancient to them. It's the foundation of everything they do. Every human military officer studies those wars. Every human doctrine is refined from tactics that killed millions. They practice warfare against themselves because they're the most dangerous enemy they've ever faced." Kreth displayed another piece of data. Psychological profiles of human commanders. "Look at how they think. They calculate acceptable losses. They use terms like strategic sacrifice and necessary casualties. They evaluate success not by who survives, but by whether the objective is achieved." Vekthar felt something he had never experienced in 4 decades of military service. Genuine fear. "Are you saying they don't care how many of them die?" "Worse," Kreth replied. "They care deeply, but they'll sacrifice themselves anyway if it means protecting their species. Every human knows they might die.
They accept it.
They plan for it. Their military doctrine assumes catastrophic casualties and keeps fighting anyway." As if to prove the point, reports came in of human special forces operations throughout Coalition space. Small teams appearing on colony worlds, not to attack civilians but to sabotage military infrastructure. They destroyed supply depots, assassinated strategic command officers, and vanished before anyone could respond. These weren't random raids. They were coordinated strikes based on stolen intelligence, executed by operatives who had trained for decades for missions behind enemy lines. Some teams were caught and killed, but they bought time with their lives for other operations to succeed. The Coalition tried to retaliate, to strike at Earth itself. A battle group of 500 ships made it within 2 light years of Sol before they encountered humanity's outer defense. Perimeter autonomous war machines that humanity had built but never deployed greeted them. Drones the size of fighters but controlled by AI that never tired, never panicked, never made mistakes. They swarmed the Coalition ships in thousands, each one adjusting its tactics based on what every other drone learned. The battle lasted 8 hours. 47 Coalition ships escaped to report that Earth's defenses were stronger than anyone had imagined. General Ramirez watched the battle from her command center, feeling sick at what she had unleashed. The autonomous drones were effective, terrifyingly so, but they were also uncompromising, incapable of mercy, designed only to kill. "This is what we've become," she said quietly to her aide. "This is what they forced us to become." The war entered its 9th month with humanity no longer defending their territory but actively invading Coalition space. Human fleets appeared in systems that had never seen warfare, but their targets confused Coalition observers. Instead of attacking population centers or orbital habitats, human forces struck with surgical precision at military installations, communications networks, and industrial facilities. They were dismantling the Coalition's ability to make war, while carefully avoiding civilian casualties. Commander Liu, "We led a strike team of 8 specialists through the ventilation system of a Vendrath command station, orbiting their 2nd colony world." Her team moved in absolute silence. Their suits equipped with technology that Coalition sensors couldn't detect, technology reverse-engineered from Coalition ships and improved by human ingenuity. "Target is 300 meters ahead," whispered her, second in command through their neural link. Humanity had developed direct brain-to-computer interfaces decades ago, but restricted them due to ethical concerns. Those restrictions had evaporated along with Mars. Liu Wei's team had one objective: capture the station's central computer core and broadcast its contents across the galaxy. Intelligence suggested the core contained decades of Coalition military planning, including evidence of atrocities that would shock even neutral species. They reached the core chamber without triggering a single alarm. The Vendrath had never imagined enemies could infiltrate their most secure installation. Their security was designed to stop direct assaults, not human special forces operators who had trained in environments where failure meant death. Liu Wei plugged a data spike into the core and watched as her AI assistant began downloading everything. Terabytes of information flowing through quantum channels directly to Earth intelligence. The download would take 4 minutes, an eternity when infiltrating enemy territory. Alarms blared 30 seconds before the download completed. Vendrath security forces swarmed toward their position, energy weapons charging. "We're compromised," Liu Wei's tactical officer reported calmly. "Estimate 60 hostiles converging. 30 seconds until contact. 20 seconds until download completes," Liu Wei replied. "We hold." Her team took defensive positions. They had trained for this scenario 100 times. Everyone knew the statistics. 3% chance of extraction if detected. But the mission was more important than their survival. The first Vendrath soldiers entered the chamber and died immediately. Human weapons designed for efficiency rather than spectacle. No energy blasts, no dramatic effects. Just kinetic rounds that punched through armor and killed cleanly. 10 seconds until download completion. 20 Vendrath soldiers dead. 40 more pouring into the chamber. 5 seconds. Liu took a round to the shoulder, her armor absorbing most of the impact but her arm going numb. She fired one-handed, each shot precisely placed. Download complete. All data transmitted to Earth, her AI confirmed. Initiating broadcast on all coalition frequencies. Liu smiled despite the pain. Then our job here is done. All teams execute extraction protocol Delta. What happened next would be debated by military historians for centuries. Liu team didn't try to fight their way out. Instead, they activated devices that created a localized electromagnetic pulse, disabling every electronic system in the station, including their own. In the darkness and chaos that followed, the team scattered, each member taking a different route, maximizing the chance that at least one would escape. Liu made it to an escape pod. 2 of her team didn't. She mourned them as the pod accelerated away from the station, even as she knew their sacrifice meant something. The data they captured was already broadcasting across the galaxy. The Vendrath tried to jam the transmission. They were 30 seconds too late. Every species with a receiver heard the truth about the Coalition's war plans. They learned that the Coalition had been planning aggression against multiple species, not just humanity. The Kthari had identified 17 other civilizations as future targets. The Vendrath had economic projections showing how they would profit from enslaving younger species. The Solari had cultural studies on which species could be integrated and which should be eliminated. Humanity hadn't been attacked because they were dangerous. They had been attacked because they were convenient, a test case for larger campaigns of conquest. The galaxy reacted with shock and anger. Species that had supported the Coalition withdrew their approval. Neutral powers began quietly supplying humanity with resources and intelligence. The moral authority the Coalition claimed evaporated in moments. On the Solari homeworld, protests erupted. Citizens who had believed they were fighting for galactic order learned they had been supporting planned genocide. The Solari government tried to calm the unrest, claiming the documents were fabricated. Then humanity released the verification codes. Every document, every communication, every order was cryptographically authentic. The Coalition couldn't deny the evidence. The Solari leadership sent secret envoys to Earth requesting peace negotiations. They were willing to surrender, to pay reparations, to submit to war crimes tribunals. Humanity's response was simple. Talk to us when the Kthari and Vendrath agreed to the same terms. The Kthari hegemony refused. Supreme Commander Vekthar, now fighting to save his political position as much as win the war, doubled down. He recalled every available ship to defend the Kthari home systems and prepared for a final decisive battle. The Vendrath tried a different approach. They attempted to negotiate separately, offering to abandon their allies in exchange for favorable terms. Humanity refused. They would accept nothing less than complete Coalition surrender and accountability for war crimes. Desperate and cornered, the Kthari made their final, terrible decision. They possessed a weapon that their ancestors had built millennia ago but never used. A device that could destabilize a star, causing it to emit a lethal burst of radiation. They had kept it as a deterrent. never imagining they would actually deploy it. Now facing defeat and humiliation, Vecthar ordered the weapon fired at Sol. The weapon traveled toward Earth's sun at relativistic speeds, impossible for conventional forces to intercept. Coalition intelligence estimated it would reach Sol in 48 hours, triggering a solar event that would sterilize the inner solar system. Earth, Mars, Venus, all would be bathed in lethal radiation. Humanity would be exterminated. The Cathari issued an ultimatum: surrender immediately or watch your homeworld die. Earth's response came from General Ramirez herself, broadcast across every frequency in the galaxy. She stood before cameras, her uniform displaying the insignia of every human colony, and spoke with absolute clarity. The Cathari have fired a doomsday weapon at Earth. They believe this will force our surrender. They are incorrect. She gestured to screens behind her showing tactical displays. 43 hours ago, we detected the weapon launch. 37 hours ago, we intercepted it. 36 hours ago, we redirected it. The displays showed the weapon's new trajectory, not toward Sol, but toward the Cathari staging area at the edge of their home system, where 2/3 of their remaining fleet was gathered. The Cathari weapon will impact their own forces in 9 hours, Ramirez continued. We are providing evacuation coordinates to Cathari military personnel. Any ship that stands down and moves to these coordinates will be spared. Any ship that continues hostile action will be destroyed along with the weapon. The galaxy held its breath. Some Cathari commanders, horrified at their leadership's decision, immediately withdrew to the evacuation coordinates. Others, bound by honor or loyalty to Vecthar, remained at their posts. 9 hours later, the weapon detonated. The radiation burst consumed 400 Coalition ships in the staging facility. An estimated 40,000 Coalition personnel died, not from human weapons but from their own doomsday device. Vecthar survived, his flagship having escaped at the last moment, but his fleet was shattered. His credibility was destroyed. His own people began calling for his arrest. On Earth, Ramirez watched the tactical display and felt no satisfaction. 40,000 beings dead because one leader refused to accept reality. She had given them warning, provided evacuation routes, offered mercy. They had chosen death instead. General, Commander Liu Wei said quietly. She had returned from her mission injured but alive. The Coalition is requesting an emergency session at the Galactic Council. They want to discuss terms. No, Ramirez said flatly. We discuss terms when they surrender unconditionally, when they agree to war crimes tribunals for everyone who authorized the Mars massacre, when they accept human observers to ensure they never threaten another species again. That's asking them to accept total defeat, Liu Wei observed. They earned it, Ramirez replied. They came to exterminate us. They killed our children. They fired a doomsday weapon at our homeworld. Now they face the consequences. Across Coalition space, governments began collapsing. The Vendrath leadership resigned en masse, replaced by reformists who immediately sued for peace. The Solari Council voted to withdraw from the Coalition entirely and accept all human demands. Cathari colony worlds began declaring independence from the hegemony. Only Vecthar and his loyalists continued fighting, but they were now criminals in the eyes of their own people. 18 months after the first Coalition ship crossed into Proxima Centauri, the war ended not with a grand battle, but with signatures on documents. Representatives from the Cathari hegemony, Vendrath Collective, and Solari Council sat in a chamber on neutral ground, watched by observers from 40 species, and formally surrendered to humanity. The casualty numbers were staggering in their asymmetry. Coalition forces, 89 million dead, military and civilian combined. Humanity, 4 million dead, including the 2 million from Mars. The mathematics that Vecthar had been so confident in had worked against him in ways he never imagined. Supreme Commander, Vecthar himself sat in a detention cell awaiting trial. His mandibles were bound as a symbol of his fall from power. The proud warrior who had laughed at human threats now faced a tribunal that would judge his actions, according to laws he had dismissed as primitive. The trials were held on Earth, in The Hague, where humanity had once tried its own war criminals. Coalition observers attended every session, watching in amazement as humans meticulously documented every crime, every decision, every order that had led to atrocities. Vecthar's trial lasted 3 months. The evidence was overwhelming. communications ordering the Mars bombardment, plans for civilian targeting, authorization of the doomsday weapon. His defense argued he had acted in what he believed were his species' best interests. The human judge, a woman named Justice Sarah Kim, delivered the verdict with the same calm precision that had characterized human military operations. "You believed you were acting in your species' interests," she said, looking directly at Vecthar. "But you confused your interests with your desires. You wanted easy conquest and found victims instead of warriors. When your victims fought back, you escalated rather than accept reality. When your escalation failed, you attempted genocide." She sentenced him to life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole after 50 years if he demonstrated genuine understanding of his crimes. Not execution. Humanity had abolished capital punishment decades ago and refused to reinstate it even for their enemies. Other coalition commanders received similar sentences. Some showed remorse, others remained defiant. All were treated according to legal protocols that neutral species praised as remarkably fair. But trials were only part of the post-war reality. The coalition species had to rebuild their societies, their economies, their understanding of their place in the galaxy. Human observers stationed on every coalition world ensured compliance with peace terms, but they also brought aid, medical technology that could save coalition lives, industrial assistance to rebuild damaged infrastructure, educational programs to help coalition citizens understand what had really happened and why. On the Vendrath homeworld, a human medical team worked in a hospital treating wounded veterans. Dr. James Chen, nephew of Ambassador Maya Chen, operated on a Vendrath soldier who had lost 3 limbs fighting against human forces. "Why are you helping me?" the soldier asked through translation software. "I tried to kill your people." Chen adjusted the prosthetic interface he was installing. "Because the war is over. Because you were following orders from leaders who lied to you. Because helping people is what I do. But after everything we did to you, after everything, we still have to live in the same galaxy," Chen interrupted. "We can fill it with hate and revenge, or we can try to build something better. We prefer better." Similar scenes played out across coalition space. Human engineers helped restore planetary shields. Human teachers worked in coalition schools, presenting historical contexts that their governments had hidden. Human diplomats facilitated conversations between coalition species that had never truly communicated as equals. The Galactic Council underwent massive reform. The old structure that had enabled the coalition's aggression was dismantled. In its place, humanity helped design a new system with checks and balances, protections for young species, and mechanisms for peaceful dispute resolution. Ambassador Chen became the first Secretary General of the reformed Galactic Council. She stood before the inaugural session and presented what became known as the Principles of Proportional Response. "War should never be the first option," she began. "But if war comes, it must be fought with clear objectives and moral limits. Victory is not measured by how much you destroy, but by what you preserve and what you build afterward." The principles she outlined would reshape how the galaxy thought about conflict. Civilians were always off limits. Surrender must be accepted. Victors had responsibilities to the defeated. Trials and accountability were required, not optional. Some species objected that these principles would make warfare inefficient. Chen's response was simple. "Good. War should be inefficient. It should be hard. It should be something you avoid unless absolutely necessary." On Mars, construction began on a memorial that would take 5 years to complete. 2 million names carved into crystal that would stand for millennia. The inscription at the base was written in every language of the coalition and humanity. "Remember what we can become. Remember what we must never become. Remember that the capacity for terrible violence must be balanced by the choice of restraint. We are all capable of atrocities. Our species is defined by whether we choose to commit them." General Ramirez attended the memorial's groundbreaking ceremony. She was retired now, having refused any position in the post-war government. She spent her time working with veterans, helping both human and coalition soldiers deal with the psychological trauma of the war. A young Cathari veteran approached her after the ceremony. His carapace still bore scars from human weapons. "Why did you show mercy?" he asked. "After Mars, you could have exterminated us. Many of your people wanted you to. Why didn't you?" Ramirez looked at the names being carved into crystal. Because that's what they would have wanted, she said, gesturing to the memorial. Those 2 million people didn't die so we could become monsters. They died because monsters attacked them. The best way to honor them is to prove we're better than those monsters. The veteran processed this, his translator struggling with the concept. On my world, we believe strength is the only virtue. You proved you have strength, but you say strength without restraint is worthless. Not worthless, Ramirez corrected. Dangerous. Strength without wisdom is just destruction. We learned that the hard way, fighting ourselves for thousands of years. We're trying to teach that lesson so others don't have to learn it in blood. Years passed. The scars of war slowly healed, though they never fully disappeared. Coalition species integrated into the reformed Galactic Council as equal members, their voices heard rather than dismissed. Trade resumed. Cultural exchanges began. Cautious friendships formed between former enemies. 10 years after the war's end, a Kthari research station discovered a new sentient species emerging into space capability. The station commander's first instinct was to report them to the hegemony for evaluation, the old way of thinking about expansion and territory. Instead, he contacted the Galactic Council and requested human diplomatic assistance. When the human delegation arrived, he explained his reasoning. We destroyed ourselves trying to dominate others, he said. Now we've learned that strength comes from cooperation, not conquest. We want to welcome these new beings properly, as equals rather than subjects. We need help remembering how to do that. The human delegation worked with the Kthari and the new species, called the Terrene, to establish peaceful first contact protocols. The Terrene were welcomed into the galactic community with celebration rather than exploitation. Ambassador Chen attended the ceremony where the Terrene formally joined the council. A young Terrene diplomat approached her afterward, their translation device struggling with their excitement. We've heard stories about humanity, the Terrene said. How you fought a war against species more powerful than you. How you won through cleverness and determination. How you showed mercy to your enemies. Are the stories true? Chen smiled, thinking of Mars, of Europa Station, of all the lives lost and saved. Some parts are true. Some parts are exaggerated. Some parts we'd rather forget. But yes, we fought. And yes, we won. And yes, we tried to do it in a way that left room for forgiveness afterward. Why? The young Terrene asked. Why show mercy to those who attacked you? Because we understood something important, Chen replied. We knew what we were capable of. We knew we could destroy the coalition if we wanted to. That's precisely why we chose restraint. Power without wisdom is just tyranny. We wanted to prove that humans could be powerful and wise. She gestured to the council chamber, filled with representatives from dozens of species, including former coalition members. Look at this. 10 years ago, these species were trying to exterminate us. Now we work together to solve problems, to explore the galaxy, to help younger species like yours find their place among the stars. That's worth more than any military victory. On Earth, in a classroom in rebuilt New Chicago, a teacher asked her students about the war. They were young, born after the fighting ended, growing up in a galaxy where humans were respected rather than dismissed. Why did the coalition attack us? One student asked. The teacher pulled up historical documents, the same ones Liu Wei had stolen from the Vendrath command station. Because they thought we were weak.